He thought no one would dare to speak. He thought a little cruelty would stay hidden forever. But he forgot something. A poisoned puppy survived. A frightened little girl found the courage to tell the truth. And one police officer refused to let silence win. What was meant to erase evidence became the very thing that exposed him. The night meant to destroy a life ended in handcuffs and truth. This is not just a rescue story. It's a reminder that justice always finds its way back, especially when ordinary people choose to do what's right. If you believe kindness deserves protection and cruelty must be answered, share this story, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption. Spring arrived quietly, dragging winter away in dirty patches of melting snow, clogged drains, and cold water creeping along the edges of empty streets. The town sat on the outskirts of the Rockies, small enough that people still recognized each other's cars, yet large enough to hide secrets in plain sight. Snow no longer covered everything in white. Instead, it dissolved into gray slush that carried cigarette butts, plastic wrappers, and things no one wanted to remember. The air smelled damp and metallic, as if the ground itself was exhaling after months of being sealed shut. Officer Ethan Walker noticed these details because he always did. He was 34, tall without being imposing, his shoulders squared by years in uniform rather than muscle. His face was sharply angled, with a narrow jaw and a faint scar along his right cheekbone, barely visible unless the light caught it just right. He kept his dark brown hair clipped short, not for style, but convenience, and his beard never grew past rough stubble. Ethan's eyes were a pale gray, observant and restrained, the kind that missed very little yet revealed almost nothing. Around others, he was polite, distant, and efficient. Around himself, he was quieter still. People in town described him as a good cop. Ethan never corrected them, though he never fully accepted the phrase either. Good implied completion. He felt unfinished. That morning, Ethan stood in his backyard, holding a chipped ceramic mug of coffee, watching water drip from the edge of the roof into a widening puddle below. The house was modest one-story, pale siding, a fence that leaned slightly to the left. He had bought it after transferring to this precinct, choosing distance over familiarity. It had been easier that way. Something warm brushed against his ankle. Ethan looked down and smiled before he could stop himself. Buddy sat at his feet, a golden retriever puppy barely 12 weeks old. His fur was a soft, uneven gold, lighter around the chest and darker along the ears, which flopped awkwardly to the sides. His paws were oversized for his body, giving him a clumsy, unfinished look, as if he were still assembling himself. One ear tipped forward, the other back. His eyes were large, dark, and impossibly earnest, fixed on Ethan with complete trust. Buddy tilted his head, then sneezed. Ethan laughed quietly, the sound unfamiliar even to him. Buddy had entered his life 2 weeks earlier, delivered in a cardboard box from an overcrowded rescue shelter an hour south. Ethan hadn't planned on a dog. He had gone to just look, the way people often lied to themselves. The volunteer, a tired woman with red hair and gentle hands, had placed Buddy in his arms without ceremony. "He doesn't cry much," she'd said, "but he watches everything." That had been enough. Since then, the house felt different, not full. Ethan didn't believe in sudden transformations, but altered. Mornings came with movement. Silence was interrupted by small, living sounds. And for the first time in years, Ethan found himself speaking aloud, narrating his actions to someone who listened without judgment. "Sit," he said now. Buddy sat immediately, tail sweeping through the damp grass like a metronome set too fast. "Good," Ethan murmured, crouching to rub the puppy's chest. Buddy leaned into the touch, warm and solid, grounding in a way Ethan hadn't realized he needed. From beyond the fence came the sound of something heavy hitting wet concrete. Ethan straightened. Across the narrow alley behind his house, Rick Harlan stood near the storm drain, wrestling with a bulging black trash bag. Rick was in his early 40s, stocky, with a thick neck and arms that suggested strength unused for anything good. His hair was thinning, slicked back in a way that tried and failed to hide it. He wore the same stained hoodie most days, sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms marked by old scratches and faded tattoos. His face was broad and ruddy, his smile quick but empty. The trash bag split open, spilling soggy cardboard, food waste, and something darker that leaked into the water, rushing toward the drain. "Hey," Ethan called calmly. "You can't dump that there." Rick looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. For a second, irritation flashed across his face before he replaced it with something practiced and false. "Morning, officer," Rick said. "Didn't see you there." Ethan stepped closer, badge visible, but his tone even. "This runoff leads straight to the creek. You've been warned before." Rick chuckled, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Come on, it's just trash. Snow's melting anyway." "That's exactly why it matters," Ethan replied. "Bag it properly or use the bins. This is your warning." Rick's jaw tightened. He nodded, once, sharply. "Sure, whatever you say." But his eyes lingered on Ethan cold, measuring before drifting down to Buddy, who had padded over and now sat beside Ethan's leg. Rick's lips twitched. "Cute dog." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, instinctive and sharp. He said nothing, simply watched as Rick gathered his mess and dragged it back toward his yard, muttering under his breath. The buddy growled softly. It was barely audible, more vibration than sound. Ethan looked down at him in surprise. Buddy had never growled before. "It's okay," Ethan said quietly, though he wasn't sure who he was reassuring. Later that afternoon, Ethan took Buddy for a short walk through the neighborhood. Snowbanks sagged like exhausted shoulders. Water trickled along the sidewalks, carrying the evidence of neglect: cigarette filters, bottle caps, a child's lost glove. People waved. Some smiled at the puppy. Across the street, a girl stood watching them. She couldn't have been older than 11. She had straight brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail and wore an oversized jacket that swallowed her thin frame. Her eyes followed Buddy with open longing. "Can I pet him?" she asked shyly. "Sure," Ethan said. She crouched and let Buddy sniff her hand before gently scratching behind his ears. He immediately rolled onto his back, paws in the air, surrendering completely. She laughed, light and surprised. "He's really sweet." "He is," Ethan said. The girl nodded, then stood. "I'm Lily. I live over there." She pointed toward the row of houses behind Rick's. Ethan introduced himself. Lily waved once more before hurrying home, glancing nervously toward Rick's yard as she did. By evening, the temperature dropped again. Ethan fed Buddy, locked the doors, and sat on the couch while the puppy gnawed on a rubber toy at his feet. The television played quietly, ignored. Ethan's thoughts drifted to a night years ago, sirens too late, A door opened after the sound inside had already stopped. He pushed the memory away. A faint sound came from outside. Ethan muted the television. Buddy's ears perked. There was a soft clink, like plastic against wood. Then another. Buddy stood and trotted toward the back door, tail wagging cautiously. "Buddy," Ethan said, rising. "Stay." The puppy hesitated, then slipped through the open door before Ethan could reach him. Ethan stepped into the cold air, scanning the yard. Shadows stretched long under the security light. Near the fence line, something pale rested on the ground. A small plastic bowl. It hadn't been there before. "Buddy," Ethan called, sharper now. The puppy lowered his head. There was a faint crunching sound. Then Buddy froze. A sound escaped him. Soft, broken, wrong. Ethan ran. Ethan reached Buddy just as the puppy's legs stiffened beneath him. The small body trembled, then jerked, teeth chattering against nothing, breath hitching in sharp, uneven pulls. Foam gathered at the corners of Buddy's mouth, white against gold. Ethan dropped to his knees, one hand steadying the puppy's head, the other fumbling for a towel, his pulse pounding so loudly it seemed to drown out everything else. "Hey, it's okay," he said, though the words felt useless. Buddy's eyes rolled, unfocused, the trust in them replaced by something Ethan recognized too well: fear without understanding. He forced himself to breathe. Training took over where panic threatened to swallow him. He turned Buddy gently onto his side, cleared the mouth, kept his fingers away from the jaws. The coiling dread in his chest tightened anyway, pulling him backward in time to a different night, a different floor, a different body that had gone still before help arrived. He had learned then what it felt like to be late. He had never forgiven himself for it. This time, he wouldn't be late. Ethan scooped Buddy into his arms and ran. The cold air burned his lungs as he reached the truck, hands slick with saliva and sweat. Buddy's head lolled against his forearm, the warmth of him frightening in how fragile it felt. Ethan drove fast but clean. Siren off, eyes scanning the road with the hyper-focus of someone holding everything together by force alone. The veterinary clinic sat on the edge of town, a low brick building with a flickering sign that read "Emergency Services." Ethan burst through the doors, voice breaking as he shouted for help. Dr. Maya Patel was already moving toward him. She was in her mid-30s, average height, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun that kept stray thoughts as contained as stray strands. Her skin was warm brown, her eyes sharp and steady behind thin rectangular glasses. She moved with practiced efficiency, calm without being cold, the kind of composure built from years of making hard decisions quickly. She took one look at Buddy and nodded to a technician. "Seizure," she said. "How long?" "I don't know, minutes, maybe more," Ethan replied, words tripping over each other. "He ate something. I think—" "That's enough for now." Her voice was firm, grounding. "We've got him." They took Buddy from Ethan's arms, and for a moment, the emptiness there felt unbearable. Ethan stood frozen as they worked oxygen mask, IV line, hands moving with precision. Buddy's small chest rose and fell in shallow jerks. Maya administered medication, watching the monitor with an intensity that mirrored Ethan's own. "Possible poisoning," she said without looking away. "We'll stabilize first, then we'll talk." Time stretched. Ethan paced, fists clenched, replaying the night before in fragments. The bowl, the crunch, the sound Buddy made that had not been right. Guilt pressed in from every angle. He should have closed the door. He should have checked the yard. He should have... Officer Walker. Ethan turned. Maya stood beside him, removing her gloves. There was a smear of something dark on her sleeve. "He's not out of danger," she said, "but the seizures have slowed." "We're doing what we can," Ethan nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." She studied him for a second longer than necessary. "If you find anything he might have eaten, bring it. Even a small detail could help." When Ethan returned home hours later, the house felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. He moved through the rooms methodically, flashlight in hand, eyes trained low. In the kitchen, he found a smear on the tile where Buddy had been sick. In the backyard, near the fence, the plastic bowl still lay where he'd seen it last, scuffed and unfamiliar. He picked it up with a plastic bag, nose wrinkling at the faint chemical smell clinging to it. The security monitor blinked on the wall. Ethan rewound the footage to the night before. The screen froze, then flickered, then went black. "No," he whispered. He checked the timestamp. Exactly the window when Buddy had gone outside. The system rebooted, cheerfully informing him of a temporary signal interruption. Ethan stared at it, jaw tight. He knew coincidence when he saw it. This wasn't that. A knock sounded at the door. Rick Harlan stood on the porch, hands tucked into his hoodie, posture loose. In the porch light, his eyes looked paler, almost washed out. He smiled when he saw Ethan. "Heard your dog was sick," Rick said. "Thought I'd check in." Ethan said nothing. Rick shifted his weight. "Kids leave stuff around. Dogs eat anything. Unlucky, you know?" Ethan's gaze dropped to Rick's boots, muddy, flecked with dark residue, then back up. "Thanks for stopping by." Rick's smile tightened. "Yeah, well, hope he pulls through." After he left, Ethan stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the sound of water rushing through the storm drain behind the house. The thaw had accelerated overnight, carrying everything downhill. His phone buzzed as he locked the door. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "Don't think trash is a small thing." Buddy did not wake when Ethan entered the clinic room. The puppy lay wrapped in a thin blue blanket, ribs rising shallowly beneath uneven golden fur. His paws twitched from time to time, as if running in a dream that never reached safety. Ethan stood close but did not touch him at first, afraid that even a gentle hand might pull Buddy back toward the edge he had barely retreated from. Dr. Maya Patel spoke quietly from the doorway. "He's stable. Not strong, but stable." She hesitated, then added, "Whatever he ingested wasn't accidental. This wasn't spoiled food or something he found on a walk." That sentence followed Ethan all the way back outside. The neighborhood looked different in daylight, stripped of night's excuses. Snowmelt had exposed what winter had hidden: flattened cans, food scraps, torn plastic bags half buried in mud. Water ran steadily toward the storm drains, carrying everything with it. Ethan crouched near the alley behind his house, nose wrinkling at the sharp, bitter smell riding the damp air. It wasn't just rot. It was chemical, industrial. "Damn mess," a voice said behind him. Jason Miller stood a few steps back, hands resting on his belt. Jason was a year younger than Ethan, broader through the shoulders, with sandy hair always a little too long for department standards. His beard was trimmed short, neat, an attempt at order that reflected his personality. Jason smiled easily with civilians, but there was a hardness underneath earned, not assumed. Years ago, a domestic call had gone bad under his watch, and though no one blamed him, Jason carried it like a private weight. "You smell that?" Ethan asked. Jason nodded. "Yeah, not normal trash." They walked the alley together, noting where runoff pooled, where debris collected unnaturally. Jason pointed toward the edge of Rick Harlan's yard. "Water's heavier there, like something seeped down and settled." Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. Later that afternoon, Animal Control confirmed 2 raccoons had been found dead near the creek, mouths foamed, bodies stiff. The timing lined up. The thaw had begun less than 48 hours ago. Silence followed the findings. Not the calm kind. This was the kind that meant people were watching, waiting, deciding whether speaking was worth the cost. Ethan noticed it when he knocked on doors. Neighbors answered politely but briefly. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything. Eyes drifted past him, toward Rick's house, then back again. Only Lily broke. She stood at the edge of her porch when Ethan approached, hands tucked into the sleeves of her jacket, though the day was warming. Her brown eyes darted left and right before settling on him. "I didn't say before," she murmured, voice barely above the sound of water rushing through the drain. "But I saw someone by your fence." Ethan knelt to her level. "When?" "The night your dog got sick." "I was up late." She swallowed. "They were wearing gloves, dark ones, and they bent down like they were putting something on the ground." "Did you see their face?" Jason asked gently. Lily shook her head. "No, but they didn't walk. They stood still for a long time, like they were waiting." "Waiting for what?" Ethan asked. "For him," she said, nodding toward Buddy's house. "For your dog." Rick Harlan waved at them from across the street not 5 minutes later. His expression was all concern, his voice loud enough to carry. "Any news on the pup?" Jason answered before Ethan could. "Still touch and go." Rick sighed dramatically. Shame, real shame. His gaze flicked to Lily, then away. By evening, the lab results came back. Maya called Ethan directly. "The substance on the food isn't something you'd find in household trash. It's a compound used in industrial pest control, highly toxic. Even small exposure can cause seizures." Ethan leaned against the wall, eyes closed. "So, someone had access." "Yes," Maya said, "and they knew what they were doing." When Ethan returned home, the house felt heavier than before, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. He checked the yard again, photographing everything. Near the drain, half buried under wet leaves, he found a torn glove-black latex, the fingers stained faintly green. Jason arrived minutes later. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Ethan nodded. This wasn't just about Buddy. A sudden buzz cut through the air. Maya again. Her voice was tight this time. "Ethan, his vitals are changing. Heart rate's dropping. We're adjusting treatment, but you need to prepare yourself." Ethan closed his eyes, the image of Buddy's trusting gaze burning behind them. Outside, water rushed faster toward the drain, carrying the neighborhood's secrets downhill, indifferent to what it destroyed along the way. And somewhere close by, someone was watching to see if the silence would hold. Ethan learned more about the town in one afternoon than he had in 2 quiet years living there. It started with records-yellowed complaints, buried in a municipal database no one checked unless they already knew what they were looking for. Jason pulled them while Ethan sat across the desk, the hum of the fluorescent lights pressing in. Citations for illegal dumping. warnings for runoff contamination, names that appeared once, then vanished. One name appeared twice, separated by years. Rick Harlan. He paid the fines, Jason said, scrolling. Minimal, enough to make it go away. Ethan watched the screen, and enough to keep doing it. They drove to the far end of town, where the creek widened and slowed, its banks still edged with shrinking slabs of ice. A woman waited near the footbridge, coat buttoned to her chin despite the sun. Evelyn Grant stood straight-backed, thin as a fence post, her silver hair pinned neatly beneath a wool hat she had likely owned longer than Ethan had been alive. Her skin was pale and papered with fine lines, but her eyes were sharp, the color of winter sky. "I don't like trouble," she said without greeting, "but I don't like silence more." She spoke calmly, hands folded, voice steady. "Years ago," she said, her neighbor's cat had died suddenly. Then a terrier down the block, always after the snow melted, always after the water ran fast. The owners left not long after grief, shame, maybe fear. No one wanted to be the one who said the quiet part out loud. "They blamed themselves," Evelyn said. "That's how it works. People would rather think they failed than believe someone meant harm." Ethan thanked her and watched as she walked away, steps measured, as if leaving the truth behind cost her something. That evening, he returned home to find the back door camera casing cracked. The lens was angled wrong, pointed at nothing. Inside, wires had been cut cleanly, not frayed, not old, deliberate. He photographed everything, logged it. The process steadied him even as his chest tightened. At the clinic, the lights were low. Buddy lay on his side, chest fluttering with uneven breaths. His gums had gone pale. His body felt cooler to the touch. Maya stood nearby, shoulders tense beneath her scrubs. "We're seeing organ stress," she said quietly. "The toxin is lingering. There's an experimental protocol aggressive detox, dialysis level support. It's risky and expensive," Ethan nodded. "Do it." She studied him for a moment. "You don't hesitate." "I know what hesitation costs," he said. Maya didn't ask more. On his way out, Ethan checked his phone. A new message waited. No number, just a video file. He didn't open it until he was alone in the truck, the engine idling. The footage was grainy, shot from an angle too close to be accidental. A gloved hand held a spoon, stirring powder into raw meat. The surface reflected a flash of green. A breath sounded close to the mic. "Cho no im di." "Make it quiet." Ethan shut off the engine. The town felt smaller after that. Closer. Like walls had shifted inward while he wasn't looking. He drove past Rick's house twice without stopping, noting the garage door scratched. Newer than the rest of the exterior. Fresh mud tracked toward the side yard, darker than the thawing earth around it. He didn't confront Rick, not yet. Jason met him later at the station, jaw tight. "You sure you want to keep pushing tonight?" Ethan nodded. If I stop, he wins time. They canvassed again quietly this time. No uniforms, no badges, just questions. A man at the hardware store remembered selling heavy-duty gloves in bulk. A clerk at a feed supply mentioned chemicals ordered under a cash account, pickup after hours. Nothing concrete, enough to sketch a shape. Back at the clinic, Buddy's heart rate dipped. Monitors beeped in slow alarm. Ethan stood with his hands braced on the edge of the exam table, feeling helpless in a way that cut deeper than any accusation ever could. He thought of the first night Buddy slept at his feet, the warmth anchoring him to the present. He thought of the bowl in the yard, the sound that followed. Maya returned, eyes tired. "We're going to start the protocol." Ethan nodded. Again. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, steady, carrying the last of the winter down toward the creek. In the distance, a truck engine turned over and died. Someone watched from behind a drawn curtain, counting minutes. Ethan's phone vibrated once more. No message this time. Just a location pin-dropped near the storm drain behind his house. The ice was gone. Whatever lay beneath it had nowhere left to hide. The clinic never truly slept, but it breathed differently after midnight. Machines hummed at a lower pitch, lights dimmed to a tired glow, and voices softened as if the walls themselves were listening. Ethan sat in a plastic chair beside Buddy's cage, elbows on knees, fingers laced until they ached. Buddy lay still beneath the thin blanket, his small chest lifting unevenly, a pale line of tape marking the vein that kept him tethered to the present. "I didn't tell anyone this," Ethan whispered, leaning closer. "Not my partner, not my chief, not even myself." He talked because silence was heavier. He told Buddy about the night that bent him years ago, a welfare check that became a race, a door forced too late, a life already gone. He had written the report correctly, testified clearly, gone home alone. From then on, he measured time in minutes he couldn't get back. Buddy's ear twitched as if listening. Ethan let his hand rest just outside the bars, close enough to feel warmth. Down the hall, footsteps approached, soft, cautious. Lily stood there, backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. Under the fluorescent light, she looked smaller than ever, her ponytail loosened, strands sticking to her cheeks. Her skin was pale, freckled across the nose. Her eyes were dark with something older than fear. "I didn't want to say before," she said. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would stop." Ethan stood and knelt so they were eye to eye. "You're safe here," she nodded, once. "There's a truck, not big, gray. It comes late, always parks by the alley for a minute, engine running. I saw it 3 times. The night Buddy got sick, it was there longer. And there's a sticker on the back peeling. A fish." Ethan felt the detail click into place, the way truth often arrived, small, undeniable. "You did the right thing," Lily swallowed. "He saw me once." "Who?" She didn't say Rick's name. She didn't need to. When Lily left with a nurse escort, Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from the department summoned him downstairs. In a glass-walled office sat Sergeant Tom Alvarez from Internal Affairs. Alvarez was in his late 40s, compact and broad, with close-cropped black hair and a mustache graying at the edges. His suit fit like armor. His eyes were steady, practiced. He rose, extended a hand. "Officer Walker," he said, "have a seat." The complaint was formal, typed cleanly. Allegations of harassment, abuse of authority, selective enforcement. Rick Harlan's words, polished by fear or calculation. Alvarez didn't accuse, he documented. That was worse. "This doesn't stop your investigation," Alvarez said evenly, "but it means eyes will be on you. Procedures matter." "They always do," Ethan replied. Outside, rain streaked the windows, thin and cold. By the time Ethan returned to Buddy's room, Maya was waiting. Her shoulders were slumped now, fatigue etched beneath her eyes. "We need to talk," she said. Buddy's monitor had changed its rhythm slower, uneven. "He had a brief arrest," she continued. "Seconds. We brought him back. But this toxin is binding in ways we didn't expect. If we don't identify it precisely, we're guessing. Guessing runs out." Ethan closed his eyes. For a moment, the room tilted. "How long?" he asked. "Hours," Maya said, "not days." The storm intensified as Ethan stepped outside. Rain hammered the pavement, carrying the last of winter's filth toward the drains. He drove without turning on the radio, Lily's words repeating in his head. A gray truck, a fish sticker. At the alley behind his house, water rushed fast and loud, a brown ribbon choked with leaves and trash. Ethan pulled on gloves, the latex snapping tight, and lifted the grate. The smell rose sharp and sour. He waited carefully, boots sinking into silt, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. Something caught the light, a scrap of vinyl, curved, fish-shaped, torn from adhesive. Nearby, a torn receipt clung to the muck, ink blurred but legible enough. Feed supply, cash sale. Ethan photographed everything, bagged what he could, hands steady despite the cold. From across the yard, a curtain shifted. A door creaked. Ethan straightened, rain soaking through his jacket. Rick stood under the porch light, face unreadable. For once, there was no smile. "Busy night," Rick said. Ethan met his gaze. "It is." Back at the clinic, the air was electric with urgency. Maya moved with renewed focus as Ethan handed over the bagged finds. A tech hustled them to the lab. Minutes crawled. Then Buddy's monitor flatlined, just a breath, a heartbeat stolen away. Alarms blared, hands pressed, voices called times. Ethan's knees buckled against the wall, a sound tearing out of him that he didn't recognize as his own. "Back," Maya said sharply. The line jumped. The room exhaled. She turned to Ethan, eyes fierce. "If we can match this compound, I can counter it, but I need certainty." Outside, the rain softened to a steady whisper. Ethan's phone vibrated with a new pin dropped on his map right where the creek widened, behind the feed supply. He looked once more at Buddy, pale but breathing, and felt the choice settle into his bones. He stepped back into the storm, following the water to where it wanted him to go. Dawn broke pale and cautious, as if the town itself were afraid to believe the night was over. The rain had thinned to a mist, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Ethan followed the location pin along the creek where it widened behind the feed supply, boots sinking into blackened mud that smelled of iron and rot. The thaw had done what it always did, peeled back a layer no one wanted to see. Near the culvert, half buried beneath reeds, he found it. A crumpled chemical sleeve, its plastic stiff with residue. The label smeared, but legible enough to match the compound Maya had described over the phone hours earlier. Ethan sealed it carefully, photographed the surrounding runoff, and marked the spot. The water carried a faint sheen, a rainbow skin that rippled with every step. By mid-morning, warrants were signed. The garage behind Rick Harlan's house looked ordinary from the street dent in the door, paint fading, weeds climbing the siding. Inside, it told the truth. Metal drums stacked too high, lids scarred and resealed. Shelves lined with gloves, funnels, measuring spoons. A ledger tucked into a drawer, written in blocky hand, listing dates that coincided with the thaw. Cash amounts, locations. When officers opened a back cabinet, the smell rose sharp and unmistakable. Rick stood rigid as cuffs closed around his wrists. Up close, his bravado collapsed into a thin, brittle anger. His face, once ruddy with bluster, had gone ashen. The lines at his mouth deepened, as if carved by resentment over years. He didn't shout. He stared at Ethan with something like disbelief. "It was a warning," Rick said hoarsely. "You embarrassed me." Ethan said nothing. The facts spoke louder now. At the clinic, the lab confirmed the match. Maya moved with renewed purpose, shoulders squared, eyes bright with the kind of focus that came when uncertainty finally lifted. The antidotal protocol was precise. No guesswork left. Lines were flushed. Adjustments made. Time, at last, leaned in their favor. Buddy's heart rate steadied first, then his breathing. The monitors softened their insistence into a measured calm. Ethan sat close enough to feel warmth returning through the blanket. Buddy's eyes fluttered open, cloudy but present. His tongue slipped out, rough and tentative, and brushed Ethan's fingers through the bars. Ethan broke. He pressed his forehead to the cage, breath shuddering, years of restraint finally giving way. The room blurred. Maya rested a hand on his shoulder, brief, professional, kind. Outside, the sun climbed. Snow remnants surrendered completely, sliding into drains now cleared and watched. News traveled fast in a small town. By afternoon, neighbors gathered near the creek as environmental crews worked. The silence that had held for years loosened. People spoke, then spoke more. Names surfaced. Dates aligned. What had once been dismissed as accidents took on shape and weight. Internal Affairs closed their file. The complaint dissolved under evidence. Jason brought coffee and a quiet smile that said enough. Lily stood with her parents by the fence later that day, eyes shining as Buddy, still unsteady, still wrapped in care, was carried past. She waved. Buddy lifted his head and wagged once, a promise more than emotion. Ethan took Buddy home at sunset. The house felt changed again, but this time with light. He washed the bowl that had been left in the yard and set it aside, then replaced it with a new one steel, clean. Outside, neighbors helped clear the alley, pulling debris from the water's path. Someone set out labeled bins. Someone else brought gloves. It wasn't redemption. It was maintenance. It mattered. As the sky turned gold, Buddy slept at Ethan's feet, breathing deep and even. The creek moved on, clearer now, carrying less of what it shouldn't. In the quiet that followed, Ethan allowed himself to believe what the morning had offered, that some nights ended not in loss, but in return. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of a fragile heartbeat that refuses to stop, or a human who chooses not to look away. If you believe in God, you may call this grace. If you don't, call it compassion. But in a world that often feels cold, cruel, and indifferent, moments like this remind us that love still has the power to interrupt evil. Every day we pass small tests of who we are, a voice we ignore, a life we think is not our responsibility, a moment where walking away would be easier. And sometimes choosing to care is the miracle itself. If this story touched your heart, please share it, because someone else may need this reminder today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. Subscribe to the channel if you believe stories like this matter, and help us keep telling them. May God bless you and your loved ones. May He protect the innocent, heal the broken, and remind us, even in the darkest nights, that hope is still alive. Amen.